Wait. Keep it real with us because relationships ain't easy, you know. I'm not talking about. Oh, I see where this automatically went. So, good evening, everybody. Alright, let me just finish sending out this, and I will start. And we are talking about embracing your exes. Is that what I said? Right. Mother Pam, Mommy Pam, you said, right, that's what I said, embrace your ex. But I don't want you to automatically assume that I'm going to be talking about relationships. It's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about embracing, or that's funny. Embracing your exes. Embrace your ex or your exes, as many of them as possible. And so this week's affirmation has to do exactly with that. Embracing your exes and understand that you are daily becoming. And so when I talk about ex, or my reference to an ex has, like I just said, Senke, has nothing to do with relationships. It has nothing to do with somebody you've been with, or whatever that, however we come about with it. The exes that I'm talking about are a few things, a few words that we deal with in our lives. And so I'm just going to get started and complete this week's affirmations before I am dripping. Hi, greetings. And so the first X that I want to talk about, or that we must learn to embrace, is our experiences. And so when we talk about experience, or when we hear the word experience, it refers to practical contact with an observation of facts or events. It refers to something that we would have gone through, something we have endured, something that we are going through. And so oftentimes we become so hateful at what we are what our current experiences are, that we don't learn to embrace what is happening in that now. But when we understand that our experiences are teaching us wisdom, and that there are things that we learn in each experience, or out of each experience, both good and bad, that has made us better individuals. We are better because of the experiences that we have. And so even when those experiences are not good, there's an end that's been worked out for us that we must learn to embrace. And so, it's there's a popular saying that says, behind every dark cloud there's a silver lining. And so sometimes we fail to see that. Sometimes we fail to embrace that, because we are caught up with the dark cloud that we don't understand, and we can't envision the fact that, as bad as it is, or as bad as it may seem now, that it is working an experience that we become better for at the end of it. And so what looks bad and what feels bad can bring about a greater purpose in us, can bring about greater understanding of purpose and life in general. But what we must do is, while we are in process, learn to embrace those experiences, good or bad. I'm not saying fall in love with the negative stuff that is happening around us, but I'm saying, what I'm suggesting in our affirmation this week and this evening, is that we learn to embrace it as something that is developing in us, something that's being used as a teaching tool, as a teaching instrument to enable us to become better and to do better. And so like I was saying, good and bad is a part of our journey. Our experiences are a part of our journey. And so if we don't embrace those experiences and learn to work through them, then in essence, what we are inevitably doing is rejecting the journey of life that was chosen for us, in a sense. And so we must, in our experiences, understand, and when we do our self-actualization and when we examine ourselves, or introspection, we'll understand quickly that we are not necessarily where we aspire to be. We're not where we want to be. We're not in the position that we are reaching for, but our experiences are helping to build that pathway to get to the place that we desire to be, the place that we long for. And so we must also acknowledge at the same time that we are, while we're not there, we are daily becoming, and it is our experiences in that daily becoming that's preparing us for that place. So the first X that we must learn to embrace is our experiences. The second X that we must learn to experience, we must learn to embrace as we daily become, is our experiment. And what I'm calling our experiment, by definition, it's a specific procedure that's undertaken to make a discovery. We're trying to discover something. We're trying to understand something. And so it's a test. It's a test of a hypothesis. We're trying to prove a fact or to demonstrate a fact that we know. And that's what an experiment is. And so when we equate that to our lives, why am I nervous like I'm sweating? Blood beats. When we embrace that, we must understand that our experiment is what is happening to us in this very moment, in this day. And so we have no control over what has happened to us in the past. We have no control over what happened to us yesterday or what happened to us 10 days ago or 10 years ago. What is happening now, what is happening in this day, what is happening in this moment is an experiment for us, because we've never been at this place before. We've never had to deal with this situation or this circumstance that you're presently dealing with before. Even if you've had similar experiences, it was never the same as it is right now. And so that's why I call it an experiment, because we've never been here before, because it's new to us. And so to us, it's an experiment. And so we must learn to embrace what is happening to us in our now moment, because this is an experiment. This situation that you're dealing with or whatever you're faced with, it's an experiment because, one, like I said, you've never been here before. It is an opportunity for you to discover something about you that you didn't know, that you may not have embraced, or you didn't know that really existed in you before. And so this moment has never happened. Where you are at right now, hi Marcus, where you are at right now has never happened to you before. And so what we've got to do is learn to embrace that as a learning experience, as a teaching tool, and as an opportunity to grow. But if we reject it and we try to always draw from something that has happened in the past, from some hurt that somebody else did, some bad experience that we had with somebody else, then we pull away from the possibilities that are available to us in this now moment. And so we are on a journey of discovery. Life is about a journey of discovery, and what we have got to learn to do is to embrace it as an experiment. Embrace your now as an experiment, because it has not happened before. And so we must learn to not reject it always, not reject the negative stuff that's happening. While we don't welcome it, what's important is that our perspective in it is right. So we see it as an experiment. What can I discover at the end of this situation? What do I discover about myself at the end of this experience? What do I discover about myself about at the end of this trial, this situation, this challenge, whatever it is that we are are meant to deal with, or we're dealing with on a daily basis, we ask ourselves, what is it that I'm meant to discover out of this challenge, or out of this situation, and understand that we are daily becoming. And so the first one is experiences. We must learn to embrace our experiences. We must learn to embrace or experiment, which is what is happening to us right now. The next X that we must embrace and deal with are what we have come to to love as our excuses. An excuse is an attempt to lessen the blame attaching to a fault or offense. We seek to defend or justify something that has happened. And so in each in each experience, in each situation, we can always look back and think of what we could have done differently, what we should have done. And but that's only because we have hindsight. But if hindsight was really flipped and it was foresight, then many of the things that we deal with, that we go through, we would not have to. But because we do not have that at the beginning, where we're at now in our experiment, we don't have the ability to see what the end is going to be. It is important that while we do that, we also become conscious of the fact that there are times in our experiment, in whatever happens to us, that we make wrong decisions, that we make wrong moves, that we exercise wrong judgment, that there are things that we could have done differently, that we should do differently, that we didn't. And so what we have got to become conscious of doing in embracing our exes is that we acknowledge that we make excuses. And so when we examine ourselves, our responsibilities to every experience and every experiment, we must take responsibility for the bad decisions we've made. We must take responsibility for the times we procrastinated, for the times we misused our power and trust and confidence that people would have put in us. And even sometimes in ourselves, we must take responsibility for that we have allowed in our lives. So we to stop making excuses for not pursuing our dreams. There are many of us that have dreams that we want to, that we talk about, that we wish for, but we never do anything to get to that place. And so we've got to, in our assessment, stop making excuses for putting our dreams off. Stop making excuses for not maintaining your peace. Stop making excuses for allowing somebody else to exercise that control over you, that robs you of your peace of mind and your joy. Stop making experiences for releasing your power to somebody else to exercise control or manipulation over you. So acknowledge that, I've made you I've put you in this position where it's easy for you to manipulate me or to seek to control me, but I'm acknowledging that this is what I have done, and I'm making a decision that this is not going to happen again, because I've stopped making excuses for my excuses, or stop justifying why I did it, or why I didn't do this, or whatever the situation is, instead of just acknowledging it. Like, I could have done it differently, I should have done this differently. And so we are to embrace our experiences. Stop making excuses for not starting your business, for not exploring, for not embracing your experiences, your now moment, for not embracing. Sometimes we need to embrace our past to let it go. Embrace what it was and stop beating ourselves up over it, so that we're able to move forward. Stop making excuses for not living. Live and learn to live your best life while you can enjoy it, while your body is better for it and about it. And so understand that while we may make mistakes, we are daily becoming. And so mistakes along the way are okay. It is okay for you to make a mistake. It is okay if you didn't get it right the first time. It is okay if you didn't get it right the first 5 times. It is okay if you didn't get it right the first 20 times. But understand that when you embrace the fact that you didn't get it right, and you don't make excuses for not getting it right, that you don't allow that to devalue who you are, because your value isn't determined by your mistakes, the mistakes that you've made. Hi, Anita. Good night. Barbados, good night. And so understand that those things that may not have worked out, that may not have turned out the way you are, while you are daily becoming, it doesn't devalue who you are. And so you've made a mistake, so you messed up. It is fine. It's a part of your now. It's part of your experience. It's a part of your daily becoming. And so we must learn to embrace the fact that we've made excuses and make conscious decisions to make the necessary adjustments and changes that we need to make. Right. The first was experience. Embrace your experiences. Embrace your experiment. Embrace the fact that we've made excuses and move forward with it. The fourth X that we must learn to embrace is our expectations. Hi, Sandrine. And so, an expectation is a strong belief that something will happen or be the case in the future. And so, expectation speaks to what is ahead of us, while experiment speaks to what is happening in the now, or expectation speaks to what is to come, what we have projected. And so we must embrace the fact that it is necessary to have a plan. But beyond that plan, beyond that idea, beyond having that dream, we must have we must live with a sense of expectation. I'm not just dreaming. I'm not just having a plan. I have an expectation of what the end result of this thing is. It's like you go to bake a cake. If you There was a time I used to bake pineapple upside down cakes, but I don't do that anymore. The kitchen and I are not necessarily friends. And so, or expectation is, or my expectation after I would have put all my energy into baking that cake, that it would come out, it would be moist, it would be whatever it needs to be, it would be goldish brown, whatever, however the cake should look. We have an expectation of what we want that cake to make. The funny thing is, and I just remembered, before I became an expert pineapple upside down cake baker, that I have not done in a long time, when it was like really, really now getting to learn that process, I remember one time, my experiment, I was essaying to bake a pineapple upside down cake and mixed all the ingredients and everything that I needed for that cake, and I had put it in the oven to bake, and I kept I kept checking for the cake to be done, because in that process, while that cake comes to the form that it should be, it begins to rise in the oven. And I kept checking for this cake to rise. I kept checking for it to become the goldish whatever color end result it should be. But the longer I checked and more I checked on this cake, it was as though it was just stuck at one place. It was just stuck at one place and nothing was happening. And so I had an expectation that this cake was going to be coming out excellently. That it was going to be good. But because it was an experiment, because I had really did not have too much experience in baking cake at that point, the experiment didn't work. And so after a long while, and realizing that the cake was not rising in the oven and nothing was happening, I gave up and I turned the oven off. And then I remembered when I was like checking back to see what had happened, I had literally put the ingredients in the pan and put the pan in the oven to bake, and did not realize that I had not put any flour in the mixture. And so I had an expectation of this amazing cake coming out, but then in the end realized that I did not put any flour in the cake. And it made sense why the cake was not rising, why nothing happened. Because number one, all the ingredients that were necessary for that expectation of a glorious pineapple upside down cake, all the ingredients were not present. And so without the flour, I had an amazing expectation and did not realize that I did not put all that I needed to put in the ingredients to make that expectation a reality. And so what I'm saying, sometimes we have expectations of things, but we don't put in place what we need to put in place for that expectation to be realized. And so I quickly learned, or immediately learned, that if I'm going to bake a cake, that I've got to ensure that the flour is a part of the experience. And so when we look at our lives, what is it that we're expecting? So we're expecting to start an amazing business. We're expecting to do this. We're expecting to have a huge job and to become whatever it is that we're working towards. The best artist, the best painter, the best designer, the best seamstress, whatever it is that we aspire to do. But then the question what we must ask ourselves is, what am I doing in my now to get me to the expectation that I'm working towards? That's right. We miss a part of the process. We can't afford to miss a part of the process. And so in our expectations, we must ask ourselves, are we putting all of the ingredients in that we need so that our expectations can be realized? And so when we examine our expectations, I thought of in management, SMART goals, and in assessing our expectations and the ingredients to get to our expectations, we must understand that what we set out to do, what we are aspiring to do, it must be specific. Don't just have a dream. Say I have a dream, but what is that dream? It must be specific. It must be measurable. It must be attainable. It must be relevant. It must be time-based. It means, what am I saying? In our expectations, in setting our expectations, we must understand, or we must embrace the fact that these expectations must be realistic, or expectations must make sense, so that when we arrive at that place, we can say, yes, I've got it, or yes, it was accomplished, because we're able to identify what we set out to accomplish. And when we're able to accomplish it, we can tick it off and say, yes, this is done. It's like having a bucket list of things that we want to do, experiences that we want to have. And as you experience it, as you get one done, you tick it off. Okay, we can scratch this out. I've gone bungee jumping, so we can scratch that out. We've gone to South Africa, so you can scratch that out. Whatever those things that we set out to do, we must be able to assess ourselves, so that when we realize it, we'll know that, hey, this was done, and we could move on from there. So our expectations, and while we set ourselves for an end, we must understand and embrace the fact that they must be specific. Exactly what is it that I am desiring at the end of this, or 5 years, 10 years from now, whatever it is. It must be specific. It must be measurable, so that we can say that, okay, this was done, or this was accomplished. And if it's not accomplished, then we must be able to measure by how much we fell short of what our desire was. We'll talk about how I forgot the flower there long, but I was now learning. Like, I was mad young, and I was experimenting. I was living in my now, and my excitement, I don't know what happened, but I forgot the flower. But now it's coming back to me, and it's an amazing lesson that I could talk about now. I don't think I've ever told that story too many times. So, our expectations must be specific. It must be measurable. It must be attainable. It must be something that can be done, and it must be relevant. It must be relevant. And so, if we want to, let's say you want to become a doctor, but you enroll in school to do accounting, unless you're trying to be a doctor of accounts, but you can't want to be a doctor of medicine, and you're in school and all the courses you're taking are business related, or along the lines of culinary development. And so it must be realistic that what we are doing on our journey relates to what our expectations are. That's right. And the final thing about our expectations, what we set ourselves to achieve, is that it must be relevant, and it must be time based. We must set ourselves a time, so that it keeps us. I think setting times to whatever we want to accomplish keeps us accountable, and that's necessary in our journey, in our process. And the final X that we must embrace. So, right, realistic, it must be attainable. Hi, Devi. Hi, Sherry. Rhonda Phillips, good night, good night, good night. Sonia, I see you, good night. And so the last X that we must learn to embrace is this. We are often in the habit of explaining things to people. And the definition of explain is to make an idea or situation or problem clear to somebody by describing it in more detail or revealing the intimate facts or relevant facts or ideas to somebody. And so we walk around, walk around, and we feel that it is necessary for us to explain our process, explain our journey, explain our experiences, explain our experiment to everybody. We must walk away from the idea that we need to explain everything to everybody. First of all, everybody doesn't need to know what your dreams are. Everybody doesn't need to know the intimate aspects of what you're dealing with. And so in building relationships with people, you'll get to know who you can share that with. But understand and embrace the fact that, number one, this might be a little bit rude, but you don't owe anybody an explanation unless you really do. So stop explaining everything to everybody. They're not going to understand anyway, and that subtracts from your ability to enjoy your experiment and live in your now, because we spend so much time wondering how people will see us, how people will estimate us, how their perspective about us will change, that it takes away from us being able to enjoy what is happening for us now in this moment. Talisha, Sherry, stop, just stop explaining. You don't owe everybody that doesn't understand your process or your journey an explanation. You don't owe everybody that ask you a question an explanation. Just understand. Sometimes it's necessary to just tell somebody, just let me deal with this, or let me handle this, and let that be that, and stop explaining everything to everybody, because in our explanation of what we are dealing with to people who don't necessarily embrace us, robs us of our ability to enjoy what is happening in this moment, because we spend more time explaining to people what happened 10 weeks ago, what happened 10 years ago that has affected us now. There's a time where we may need to refer to what our experiences in the past have been, and it's necessary, and that's good, but we can't live our lives in a way that we walk around and everybody that doesn't know what's happening with us, we need to tell them all the details of our lives, or even if they know what's happening with us or what we're dealing with, that we need to explain the intimate details of our lives. Stop that. So this week's affirmation, just wanted to encourage us along those lines, that we learn to embrace our exes, embrace your experience, embrace your experiment, embrace the fact that you have excuses, that we've made excuses, and when we embrace that, we must make decisions to change what needs to be changed. So embrace your experiences, embrace your experiment, what is happening here now. Embrace the fact that you've made excuses and make the necessary changes to that. Embrace your expectations. Have an expectation of what you want the end to be. And the final X that we must embrace, the fifth one, is that embrace the fact that you don't need to explain everything to everybody. You don't need to explain anything to everybody. And you will know who you should explain anything about your process, your details with. And outside of that, you owe nothing to anybody except love. And so that's our affirmation tonight. Thank you for joining the conversation, and have a good rest of the week, everybody. Goodbye. Oh,